Well, hi, everybody. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Corliss,
Here.
Halliburton,
Here.
Morales,
Here.
Nash,
Here.
Stead,
Here.
Lilitz. 5 present, 1 absent.
In some ways appropriate areas, but then to
Do you want to do?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, if I could just call a point of personal privilege. Earlier today, I was able to accept an award on the city's behalf from the Office of Highway Safety. And it was for our work with the Traffic Fatality Review Task Force, going and making sure that every single time there's a traffic fatality, whether it's car, bike, pedestrian related, that we're going and we're looking at each one, trying to figure out what the issues and things that contributed to that crash, and then trying to figure out where those similar conditions might exist in different parts of the city and coming up with policy issues. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up is I had the opportunity to accept the award, but I wanted to recognize both the mayor and the mayor's office and Bree Brush in general. When we started the task force, the mayor was extremely supportive of helping put this together. And so when we accept these these awards, there's really so many people that helped make it possible. So I wanted to say thank you for helping us put together that task force, and Bree, who's not in here right now, for really doing all the legwork and putting it all together. I really do think it's going to make a difference. But I wanted to make sure that I celebrated some of the other folks who made the award possible. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilmember, and appreciate you calling out and recognizing Bree's contribution to the work. And it's an important partnership with ACHD and a whole bunch of other people within the city of Boise too, to take this on at your with your leadership, and really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Congratulations. All right, we're going to start with the property tax overview. Welcome, Eric. We've asked Eric to come in and share some background on property taxes, the relationship between what we are allowed to take and grow and the impact that has on homeowners as well as commercial properties, and all of this going into the work that we're doing related to building the budget for this next coming fiscal year. Welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of the council. In our discussion today, we have several objectives. First, we want to provide some context on fiscal year 24 property taxes. We'll go through how much property taxes comprise of our general fund. We'll talk a little bit about levy rates and assessment trends. We'll talk about impacts on the average homeowner and burden shift that we've seen historically. And we'll also talk about the rebate program. And then, as the mayor mentioned, we'll use this to guide ourselves going into the fiscal year 25 discussion. We can talk about current conditions, talk a little bit about where we stand within the forecast and some considerations for the upcoming budget development. We'll conclude with next steps and any comments or questions from the council. So this first series of slides is really just kind of an overview as to total general fund revenues. And you can see that section in orange representing property tax. These are our preliminary estimates for fiscal year 25. So these are still in the course of being adjusted. But you can see property tax making up about 60% of total revenues. You can see sales tax, development fees, departmental fees being our next three largest categories. What I wanted to do was to break these revenues into three categories. So first, showing the revenues that are generally available for general purposes. And those represent about 76% of the total pie here. And the categories falling within that are property tax, sales tax, liquor tax, franchise fees, and internal charges. Moving to kind of the next category, even though department revenue and development fees are some of our larger revenue categories after property tax, those are primarily service reimbursements. So when we receive revenue within those categories, it's to offset an expense in some other area, and it's directly associated with that expense. So that's 19% of the other 24%. And then the last 5% are revenues that are generally not counted upon for ongoing budget balancing. And things like that would be our carry forward or fund balance, which are by their nature one-time, fines and forfeitures, and other revenues. And things like other revenues might be interest earnings or one-time asset sales, things of that nature. So looking at that property tax sector, or that general purposes section of 76%, you can see that the overwhelming majority of that is property tax, 79%. But that other 21% that's available for general purposes has its own resource constraints. If we think about sales tax, we've been growing at 1% per year. We actually had several quarters of reductions based on statewide sales tax activity. Liquor tax is dependent upon consumption trends, is dependent upon the economy, dependent upon a whole bunch of different things. Franchise fees have been a pretty steady revenue source, steady in that they haven't declined in their totality over the years, but they haven't grown much either. And then internal charges are reimbursements from the enterprise funds for services delivered on their behalf. When we look at property taxes for fiscal year 24, really it was one of the more favorable years that we've seen in several years. We saw many homeowners seeing reductions in their property tax obligation of up to 15-20%, sometimes slightly more, sometimes slightly less. And that reduction reset their property tax obligation, in some instances, several years. The reductions in property tax that we're seeing in fiscal year 24 were attributable to three primary factors. First was assessment trends. So county assessments, which in prior years had seen higher rates of increase for residential than commercial properties, this year were reversed, where we saw lower increases for residential than we did for commercial. There was statewide property tax relief that was provided through House Bill 292. And then the city of Boise's part in that, again, taking less than 3% in fiscal year 24. Since the beginning of the pandemic, there was growth of 1.86%, foregone revenues of $7.5 million. So that 7.5 million otherwise could have been part of the property tax base, but was not. I'm going to walk through the levy rate calculation. So at its most basic level, you take the general fund property tax budget, divide that by the total taxable market value, and your result is the levy rate. So for fiscal year 24, the property tax budget was $180.8 million. Total taxable market value of $44.3 billion, resulting in that 0.00403 levy rate. In any given year, the property tax budget can increase by up to 3% per year, plus an allowance to account for new construction, so new payers coming into the system. And the levy, when you take that levy rate and you multiply it by the taxable market value for any given property, that will equal that property's tax obligation. That 0.00403, I'll note, is the city of Boise's property tax rate. Other agencies have their own calculations, and cumulatively that comprises any individual property's total property tax bill. There is an inverse relationship between total taxable market value and the levy rate. What that means is when the total taxable market value increases, we'll see the levy rate decrease. And when the total taxable market value decreases, the levy rate increases. So for fiscal year 24, where we saw in total, the total taxable market value decline, we saw the levy rate increase slightly. This slide right here is a demonstration of the total tax obligation for the average home within the city of Boise. And if you go back to fiscal year 2016, you can see that 56% of the assessed value was subject to property tax. Fast forward to fiscal year 24, and you can see that 74% of the average home was subject to property tax. The primary reason for that is the diminishing value of the homeowner's exemption and the rate of increase for residential properties versus commercial properties. You can see the orange line on this slide representing the homeowner's exemption, which has grown only by 39.5% from fiscal year 2016 to today, whereas the assessed value for the average home has grown by 127% over that same period.
And Eric, will you explain why that the homeowner's exemption has grown so much less?
Thank you, Mayor, for that question. The homeowner's exemption is legislated by the state. There was a freeze that was put in place about 5 years ago by the state, capping that homeowner's exemption at $100,000. About 2 years ago, it was increased to $125,000 and capped at that level again. So prior to that, prior to the first freeze, it would grow each year commensurate with values. That no longer happens. So property values are increasing and the homeowner's exemption is remaining flat.
And so when you say prior to that, you mean prior to 2016, when it was, so it would grow just as assessed values when then the legislature stopped that and kept it frozen in time?
That is correct.
I just want to point that out. I mean, over the years, we've done this so many times with a new council. And for our residents, this has real implications on what their property tax bills look like, given that we can only grow our revenues by 3% plus growth. But with assessments growing as they have, the former council really urged the county assessor to take a look at assessments as another way of kind of getting a bite at this to relieve residents. But ultimately, the change in the way the homeowner's exemption work had such an outsized impact on everybody.
That's correct. Thank you, Mayor. This next series of slides shows the average home in Boise and then the compounding impact of burden shift over the years. So let me just orient ourselves to this chart. The gray portion of this bar chart represents in 2013 the taxes paid for the city of Boise portion of that property's property tax obligation. And you can see that it remains constant through each year of this chart. Then the next stack on this chart is the green portion. And the green portion shows what the property tax bill would have been if property taxes only grew by the amount of the city's elective 0 to 3% increase. And then the salmon portion shows what their actual property tax bill was, or the portion that was attributable to burden shift. So if you look from 2013 to 2014, absent burden shift, the property tax obligation for that property would have gone up by $20. There was another $74 worth of burden shift. Because this is cumulative, you can see that growing in the next year to $143 from burden shift and $40 for the city's election to take an increase. The red line shows what the property tax obligation would have been if taxes would have been consistent with CPI. So if you zoom over to the right, fiscal year 24, you can see that the CPI line is above the green bar. And what that says is that if property taxes would have grown only commensurate with the amount of growth that the city has taken, property tax obligation on the average home would actually have been lower than CPI over that period. But that salmon portion represents the burden shift over time. To put some numbers to that, taxes on the average home have increased by 120% over that period. $581 or 73% of that increase is attributable to burden shift. Again, that burden shift is due to two factors: the diminishing value of the homeowner's exemption, as well as the rate of assessed increase for residential versus commercial properties. If taxes on the average home had tracked with the annual budget increases of 0 to 3%, the average home would have seen a lesser cumulative increase of $214. And then again, absent burden shift, city increases on property tax have been lower than CPI. Any questions on this one before I move?
Madam Mayor, Eric, I just want to say thank you for putting this together. In the legislature, this was information was we were told that it was unknowable. So thank you for making it available to the public so that we can see who's driving what on when it comes to property taxes.
Absolutely, thank you.
Well, and I just want to be clear, Eric, to legislators out there that might think that this is still unknowable, we have been sharing this with the legislature for years because we've had the numbers. It means real things for real people. We've presented solutions as have other cities. And this is definitely something that has been knowable and most importantly, feelable by Boiseans and Idahoans across the state.
Madam Mayor, if I may, Eric, can we project out to what % of increase we expect this to be with this burden shift? Why I ask that is I think about those, like my mother-in-law who's on a fixed income and others who are on really fixed incomes, the Social Security or the retirement, and how is that going to grow with inflation? Is it growing? Seems a lot faster than inflation. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, that is correct. The property tax burden has grown faster than inflation. And really, to drive that home, that red line shows if it would have just grown with inflation, where property tax obligations would be in 24 versus the total of that stacked column. In terms of projections, we are awaiting information from the county assessor's office for the upcoming fiscal year that will show us what the trends will be on this upcoming round of assessments. We do expect to have that information by the time we have our budget produced and for our budget workshops.
Great, thank you. I do feel like those who are on a fixed income are really going to bear the brunt of not having our state officials take a look and make some changes. It's real hard, necessary changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is a nice segue to the next slide, where we'll talk a little bit about the property tax rebate program, which has been a program that the city has offered to aid some of our more vulnerable community members in paying their property tax bill. House Bill 550 that was approved during the fiscal year or during the 2022 legislative session allowed cities to provide a property tax rebate. In fiscal years 23 and 24, we were the only city in the state to offer this program. We offered it to Boise residents who were approved for the circuit breaker program, meaning that they had an income below a certain level. The parameters of that program were outlined in an ordinance. We've had to update that ordinance each year to outline specific dollar thresholds and the various parameters of that program. But in total, between those 2 years, there have been rebates issued or anticipated to be issued of approximately $1.5 million. Looking forward to fiscal year 25, I'll first just speak globally before we get into property tax a little bit. We know that uh, we anticipate to be in a positive position when we look at our revenues and our anticipated expenses. While we do anticipate to be in a positive position, we do expect reduced flexibility as compared to recent budget cycles. We also know that there are many known but to date unquantified needs that will need to be addressed in upcoming budget cycles. So some examples of those might include police staffing or fire and library staffing, technology needs, compensation and benefit increases, as well as capital infrastructure needs. The economy itself remains very difficult to predict. We have persisting inflation. We have low unemployment, so those two things are a little bit counter to one another. We do have global instability, that we're seeing, and the prospect for more, as well as uncertainty that comes with national elections. So the revenue estimates that we are building and will be bringing forward as part of the 2025 proposed budget really attempt to balance, being cautious while also representing the current reality of economic health. There are also certain expense categories that are increasing more rapidly than our revenues. When that happens, it hampers our ability to expand service levels and respond to growth. So I'm going to go into a few examples of that. The first one I will offer would be software. So as we look at software costs, in fiscal years 22 and 23, they were approximately 70% higher than the average spend between fiscal years 2017 and 2019. I chose those years because I wanted to separate out the primary COVID years. So the 3 years immediate to COVID and the 2 years post-COVID, 70% increase. Fuel, similar time horizon, 60% higher. And then insurance, 50% higher. As we look at PERSI, or our contributions to the state retirement system, we've been noticed that rates are going up, that the city's contribution rates are going to need to go up. And cumulatively, those rate increases are going to result in general fund costs of approximately $1.5 million. And that increase is roughly equivalent to a 0.8% property tax increase. So almost a third of the statutorily allowable 3% would be consumed just from increases to the state's retirement system. Also, a few weeks back, we gave an overview of the capital fund and talked to the need to keep up with inflation. The difference between kind of our actual contributions over a multi-year period and what they should have been to keep up with cost increases is a gap of approximately 25%. So when we see, whether it be inflation in our capital fund, in our non-personnel costs, or even in some of our personnel costs exceeding to, growth of, 20, 30%, it does produce a kind of a perilous condition when it comes to responding to growth in other areas.
Madam Mayor? Eric, a question on the software costs. Is that due to number of employees getting software, the cost of the software itself, or the number of software programs?
Madam Mayor, Council Member, thank you for that question. Really, it's a multi-pronged reason for that, but one of the principal reasons for that is that many software providers are changing their model, and they're moving from kind of an on-premises model to a cloud-based subscription model, and some of our larger systems are requiring that. When we move to that cloud-based subscription model, there are very significant annual cost increases. So previously, we might see a large expense, when we procured the software, and then a minimal expense beyond that. Now we have an implementation cost, which is sometimes, quite high, and an ongoing software maintenance expense based on that shift in model. We also have systems that are approaching end of life or are at end of life. So there's really a kind of a litany of different factors that are contributing to that.
Thank you.
So the forecast itself presently assumes 3% increase in the full impact of projected new construction. Each year, as part of the budget process, there's a full review that's undertaken to determine what the approach will be for the upcoming fiscal year. And as part of that review, the mayor considers what level of increase will be proposed to the city council as part of the proposed budget. Some preliminary recommendations from the mayor, in recognition of rising costs and service demands, we consider a higher increase than has been included in recent years. And again, since the pandemic, we've been averaging a 1.86% increase within our property tax. Second recommendation would be to continue to offer that property tax rebate program for qualifying residents. The value of that in fiscal year 23 was $976,000. In fiscal year 24, it was $496,000. The reason that it was lower in fiscal year 24 than 23 was due to lower tax obligations for eligible participants.
Madam Mayor, I've got a question for you. On that point, was the total number of applicants about the same then?
Madam Mayor,
So what was the
Councilmember Morales, it was, we had a slightly higher compliance rate in terms of folks applying in fiscal year 24 than we did in 23. So more participation, less of an obligation because of the factors that drove down property taxes.
Okay. Madam Mayor, just one more question. If we expect the people that could qualify for that program to decrease if the requirements stay the same. So, assessed value has to be under 400,000 on their home, I believe. There's an income requirement, I think 37,000 a year. If those stay the same and inflation continues, maybe do we foresee an issue where less people may qualify for the program?
Madam Mayor, Council Morales, that is always a possibility as we see Social Security increases that would result in a higher income level. There's a possibility that people might become ineligible for that program.
And so just in order for them to be able to continue eligibility, we would need to rely on the state updating circuit breaker requirements. Okay,
That is correct.
thanks.
From a process perspective, the next time we'll be talking about budget will be a couple weeks from now, where we'll do our first budget workshop. Each of the departments will come and present on their budget. We will release our budget book on June 14th. Included in that budget will be our capital fund and property tax recommendations, along with any other changes to the operating budget. Subsequent to the book being released on the 14th, we'll have our budget workshop, our second budget workshop on the 25th, an opportunity for the public to come and, state their concerns or any other issues at the public hearing on July 16th, ultimately resulting in the budget adoption on August 27th. I'll note that we made our budget feedback website available on April 10th. That's an opportunity for the public to provide commentary on the budget itself directly to the mayor and the council. We're compiling the first round of feedback, and you should be getting that in the next day or so. And we'll be giving regular updates throughout the budget development process on that. With that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions that the council might have.
Thank you. Nobody in here. Sorry, people online. I was, thank you. My mic was on. Nobody, and I didn't know it. Nobody knew it except somebody in the back of the room yelling at me that it was off. Steve Hubble is with us today to present an update on the work that we're doing around the assured water supply. You'll remember that language is in our modern zoning code to make sure that as we develop, there is water into the future for existing and future residents. And appreciate that both Steve Hubble, who leads our Climate Action Division, and Steve Burgos, who leads the Public Works Department, are here for this. Great. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members. As the Mayor mentioned, Steve Hubble, Climate Action Manager in the Department of Public Works, and glad to be here with you all this afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity. Before I jumped into assured water supply specifically, I wanted to take a minute to just share a little background on the city's water resources program. You hear a lot about water renewal, a big part of our department, but this is our water resources group. This is a small team that's part of our Climate Action Division, and they are primarily responsible for managing the city's extensive portfolio of water rights. There's a lot of administrative responsibilities that go along with that. So that's one of this team's key responsibilities. In addition, they have a big role in engagement. So working with other water stakeholders throughout the community, from our water utilities to state agencies to other municipalities, and then a wide range of other stakeholders who are engaged on water supply issues throughout both the city and the region. And then the assured water supply, which we'll talk about today, really ties to the team's work related to water supply and conservation. And I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge Robin Lee Busan, who's here, our water resource coordinator, and then also Mary Grant from legal, who I know you all work with quite frequently. They both played a key role in developing the assured water supply. So just jumping in with a little background on what the requirements are. As you all are aware, a lot of outreach happened with the modern zoning ordinance prior to its adoption. And a common theme that really came up throughout the community was long-term availability of water resources and ensuring that that was sustainable. And so with the role that the city plays in the land development approval process, there was an opportunity to line those approvals with confirmation of long-term water supply. And of course, doing so helps prepare our community to be more resilient and anticipate some of the water supply impacts that we may see over time from climate change and drought. So what is assured water supply? It's a new set of requirements within the modern zoning ordinance that more directly connects the approval of land development projects with available water supply. It's not that dissimilar from the process that the city goes through when approving development and we think about transportation capacity or roadway infrastructure. We work with ACHD to consider those factors during the approval process. The regulation of water in Idaho is complex, and the state definitely has the lead role. Our assured water supply requirements were carefully crafted in coordination with stakeholders, including the Idaho Department of Water Resources, to make sure that we complement and don't infringe upon existing state regulations. The city takes its legal authority for this program through the Local Land Use and Planning Act. And these requirements were modeled based on what we saw in other local governments and state programs across the West, most notably an assured water supply program at the state level in Arizona. While focusing on what assured water supply is, it's also important to take a minute to share what it isn't. Following up on the comments from my last slide, I want to reconfirm that assured water supply complements existing state regulations. It doesn't infringe on water rights administration or the appropriation process that's carried out by the Department of Water Resources or other water-related regulatory programs from the Department of Environmental Quality or the Public Utilities Commission. Our assured water supply program focuses on potable or drinking water supplies. It's not applicable to water supplies that are just used for irrigation purposes. So things like canal companies, irrigation districts, and the like are not included in this particular discussion. And then assured water supply won't directly resolve past challenges with water supply. So for example, a failing water supply well. The program, however, may help to build the collection and the database of information that may help troubleshoot some of those challenges going forward. So just briefly, this is an outline of what the ordinance looks like in the section where it's embedded into the zoning ordinance. And I wanted to highlight 3 sections here on the following slides that are bolded there just to provide a little additional information. So first, the ordinance uses nomenclature of what's called a designated water provider. And functionally, these are the water utilities that operate within the city. So that's Veolia North America and then Capital Water. And the ordinance requires these utilities to provide an analysis to address assured water supply for the areas of the city where they provide service. The technical criteria that are required for an assured water supply analysis are noted here. We've developed additional guidance and a step-by-step application to help those people that need to go through the approval process. And these are included in a supplemental guidance document. I want to take a minute to touch on applicability. So these are the types of developments that are required to comply with assured water supply. So any new development that's occurring on land that is currently undeveloped will need to apply or comply. Any redevelopment that's residential and has greater than 5 units will also need to comply, 5 units or greater will need to comply. Any development that's in a state designated groundwater area, which there is one of those areas in a portion of Southeast Boise. And then there are a few limited exemptions in the code for special circumstances. And so what would compliance look like if I were a developer? So essentially there's a 2-path process depending on where your development is and where you will be seeking your water supply. If you are planning to build in an area that's served by a public water utility and you have the ability to take their service, you'll follow the path on their left. So as mentioned previously, the designated water provider or utility should be demonstrating compliance for assured water supply within their service area. And then once your development comes through the process, you would check back with their work to ensure that service is available and supply is available. The city would then review that to ensure compliance. So that is the more streamlined process. And that is likely the vast majority of our applications would go through that option. There would also be an option for a private system. Some larger communities choose to have their own water system or have a number of wells that would supply water to that site. And those would basically need to prepare a full analysis to the same level that the water utilities do. And then the city would also review that for compliance. Again, that's the least likely scenario here, just given the nature of land development in the city and the nature of the modern zoning ordinance really focused on infill development, redevelopment, those things where utilities and infrastructure are currently available. So our current status, these requirements were approved into the modern zoning ordinance last year with a delayed effective date of July 1, 2024. So that's when these requirements will actually begin. In addition to the ordinance, council approved technical guidance back in February in the form of a guidance document. We had good stakeholder participation on that, both from utilities and from the Department of Water Resources to make sure that our guidance was well dialed in. Currently, our teams in Public Works and Planning and Development Services are working to integrate these requirements into the development review process. We're awaiting assured water supply analysis submittals from both designated water providers, and we'll need to review those once they are received. And then we'll begin compliance for specific development projects this summer. Those are all the slides I had, but would be glad to answer any questions.
Madam Mayor? Yeah, Steve, thank you very much for this presentation. It's helpful to get some deeper analysis on how our water providers like Veolia are going to provide assurance that the water is going to have enough supply. I'd be interested when, it seems like we're waiting right now for the water supply submittals. I want to see if council could get a copy of what that looks like when it comes through. Second question, I know that Ada County has done quite an in-depth water analysis, a well study for West and Southwest Boise. And what it's showing is the trends of people who are on wells, and there are a significant amount that live in the city. They get their drinking water from wells. As the over time, the resource is draining. It's not the well itself is failing, it's the aquifer is depleting. So what is the city doing to assure water supply for those people who are on wells?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, let me see if I can take those backwards.
Okay.
Although I think the first one was a little easier. So certainly we can coordinate with the mayor's office once the submittals are received from the utilities and determine the best approach to engage with council at that point. The second question, I'll take that in two parts. The first discussion on Ada County's analysis, I had a chance to see a little bit of their presentation last week at a water event, but would definitely like the opportunity for our team to follow up, receive some of those documents, review them in addition to that. To the second part, you pointed out a challenge that's not only faced in the city, but also in the region as our land use transitions from what was historically agriculture to more suburban. In terms of what the city's doing, I would point back to my comment on the modern zoning ordinance. Certainly the intent there is to focus development within the city, within areas that are already potentially already development that are appropriate for redevelopment or have utilities in this instance, such as water. And then in addition, we do, let me follow up for you rather than fumble through a lot of papers, but we do have a number of things in the code that address groundwater recharge, for example, and we can get some more details to you.
Madam Mayor? Yeah, Steve, I appreciate that. One of the concerns that I have with the assured water supply language is that we are looking at that assured supply for that new development, but with folks that are around that development, there's no assurance, right? So we're only asking for assurance within that development, but it doesn't address any concerns with those around it and how they're impacted, and if they are impacted, what remedy they have. So I just want to bring that up as a concern. I know to address some of this, I know Ada County is actually working with Veolia and putting in water mains and lines to get people off wells so that they have the ability to hook up. So the study is definitely worthwhile to see, and I hope the city will take a look to see what we can do moving forward to either run water lines, work with Veolia to run water lines so that they can have a hookup for those that are on wells, or assistance in helping them dig their wells deeper. It's costly. It's about $30,000, and it could be a wait list of up to 2 years, and that's for drinking water. So thank you.
Madam Mayor, Steve, I've got just more of a question out of curiosity. There were sort of the two different methods that people could go about getting their water approved, and the unorthodox method was the self-contained one, them doing it on their own land, probably drilling a well. Is there another way to do it besides drilling a well, providing water? I'm curious if we see other people bringing water onto site other than just drilling well, or is it really just drilling wells?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I guess there could be a third scenario where a property might somehow have access to surface water that was not previously allocated. They could access the surface water, treat it, and then deliver it through a utility system. I think that'd likely be unlikely, and the approach would be some type of access to groundwater that is then individual to a specific property or treated and distributed to multiple properties.
Yeah, and something that would probably be pretty rare for us to see, I would imagine.
It would seem to me that that's a more of an unlikely scenario, given the nature of development in the city.
Yep, great. No other comments or questions. Just thank you for coming in. Thank you for the presentation, for the information. It's always great to hear, even if we've heard it before. It's good to hear again and again and again. And I would say the same to Eric, although he already left. It's nice to have refreshers on the property tax and to be able to look at these things, you know, as we know that they're going to come in front of us here pretty soon. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And now, last but not least, we've got Nikki Carr here to provide an overview of the Energize Our Neighborhoods program.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Nicole Carr, Program Manager for Energize Our Neighborhoods. It's great to meet our new council members. Thank you for the opportunity to share the basis and the basics of our Energize program and how the city and neighborhoods work together under this program.
All right, I'm already going to cut you off.
Okay.
Are you going to talk about the neighborhood concert series in this
No,
at all? Is that what this picture is from?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, all right. These were great events. Was Energize involved with it? I know it's other organizations as well, but.
Madam Mayor, Energize supports this event by tabling and sharing resources, but this event is funded through Arts and History, through an Arts and History grant awarded to the Morrison Center and Lost
Yeah.
Grove Brewing.
Right. I'll just say that, and if council doesn't have the dates, I'd suggest getting them. They're great events. I mean, they're all packed like this, and it's really fun to see various different city departments as well as others that are part of this, and the community loves it.
Yes, I attended an event last year in the Southeast neighborhood, and it was a great time.
Madam
Great.
Mayor, I'd just like to say that.
Sorry, now we're off the rails.
No. I think the Helen B. Louder location for the concert series last year was fantastic. So I hope to be able to attend again.
No more comments. Okay. Thanks, Nicole. Sorry.
Sure. The Energize program partners with neighborhood associations to enrich the lives of residents, enhance the identity of our neighborhoods, and encourage a strong sense of community. Lucy's not here, but this photo is from You Stick and Bloom.
That was my guess. Now we're gonna play guessing games. It's like, I think that's you stick.
By forming a neighborhood association, members work toward common goals. With a unified voice, they respond to community concerns, preserve and improve their neighborhood, plan and hold social events, and interface with local government and organizations. Recognized neighborhood associations are eligible for funding capital and social projects through Energize, which I'll cover in just a moment. There it goes. Energize partnered with residents and community leaders in the Vista neighborhood in 2014. Through collaboration with residents, business owners, and key stakeholders, opportunities were identified to improve neighborhood livability. Projects included traffic calming measures, street tree planting, a neighborhood cleanup, and traffic box art wraps. It became apparent that there were many other opportunities to build capacity, engage a wider audience, and develop community within all of Boise's neighborhood associations and with residents in general. With the pillars of the program established in 2014 as livability improvements, capacity building, and community connections, the Energize initiative has expanded to offer educational workshops, lead community events, support the network of neighborhood associations, administer the neighborhood investment program, and host an annual neighborhood conference. Today, the city recognizes 35 neighborhood associations. Neighborhood associations work together to improve safety, beautify public spaces, and foster a sense of belonging among people in that area. The voluntary and open nature of neighborhood association differentiates them from homeowners associations. Energize provides resources, funding, opportunities, and networking platforms for neighborhood associations to collaborate and enact positive change in their communities. The program empowers residents to take an active role in shaping their neighborhoods by providing them with the tools, resources, and support needed to initiate and implement community-driven projects. Neighborhood associations can access grants and training opportunities in support of projects and initiatives. Energize fosters collaboration among residents, businesses, government agencies, nonprofits, and other stakeholders to address common neighborhood issues or concerns. Neighborhood associations often have a deep understanding of the needs and aspirations of their communities. By seeking grant funding opportunities, they become empowered to address those needs directly. Grant funding provides financial resources that can impact the capacity of neighborhood associations when implementing projects and initiatives. Energize offers grant funding under 2 programs: ACT, or Activate, Connect, and Transform grants, and the Neighborhood Investment Program. ACT Grants is a competitive program offering funding of up to $2,500 per fiscal year to neighborhood associations. Funding is broken out into 3 categories: celebration, which brings together neighborhoods by engaging the community through events and placemaking activities like National Night Out, annual picnics, and concert series. Communication supports the communication efforts of the neighborhood for annual meetings, website hosting, printing, and meeting supplies. And community service addresses a community need by making visible neighborhood level change, neighborhood cleanup events, beautification efforts, sign maintenance, murals, and small community projects. This program has a $40,000 budget. If all 35 neighborhoods applied for the full $2,500 amount, only 16 associations would be awarded. Most apply for lesser amounts, asking just for what they need. I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions on our ACT grant program?
Madam Mayor,
Mhm.
I appreciate the city actually putting these in place. As a neighborhood association, when we just had the larger grants and had to wait annually, it was really difficult to stand up activities. So thank you very much for providing this program and keeping it going for the communities.
Absolutely.
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to ask what percentage of neighborhood associations are taking advantage of that each year?
That's a great question. I don't have a percentage to share with you, but I can report back. There are some neighborhoods that are self-sustaining in their financial realms. Think neighborhoods who have large-scale events that bring in funding in support of their efforts. And then there are some that don't take advantage of it at all. So really reaching out to them is a goal of mine to make sure that they're connecting with those funding opportunities.
Oh, Madam Mayor. Hi, Nicole. I know we've met over Zoom, but it's nice to see you in person. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I think because you and I have talked more in depth about these programs too. I wondered, I think if I remember correctly, there had been some changes this year to the program. Can you touch on those a little bit? And is it just that the interest has increased and so therefore money was a little tighter going out to different neighborhood associations, or was there more to it than that this year?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Stead, thank you for that question. There are changes to the ACT grant program rolling out October 1 with the new fiscal year. And those changes really scaled back the number of categories that you see here are 3. Prior to, I should say, as the program stands now, there were 5 categories and each category had its own funding maximum. So that money had to be split between 5 different categories at different cap amounts. So what we've done to make it more equitable and streamline the process for both neighborhood associations administratively and our staff is we've reduced those categories to 3. We've reduced the number of cycles for applications that we accept. We were doing it 3 times a year. Now we're looking at 1 to 2 times a year. And the biggest change that I'm most proud of with this program is that the funding will now be upfront for our neighborhoods instead of a reimbursement model. And that alleviates a lot of financial burden to our neighborhood association board members who are fronting that money personally and waiting for a reimbursement from the city later.
Madam Mayor, one more follow-up question. Was that, I guess, was that, because I think that's the grants, the most recent grants that folks will be receiving are part of that October 1 fiscal year. Is that right?
No, we're in the cycle still for FY '24. So
Okay.
these changes that I'm sharing will take effect October 1.
Got it. Thank you.
Each year, the Neighborhood Investment Program, a grant program within Energize, funds up to $500,000 in capital construction projects. Many of these projects require collaboration and partnership between stakeholders, local businesses, nonprofit organization, and government agencies. These partnerships increase the resources available for community development and problem solving. For fiscal year 2025, which is the most recent neighborhood investment application cycle, projects were centered around a theme to align with the city's strategic priorities. Neighborhood associations were encouraged to focus on movement for everyone with a specific eye toward bicycle and pedestrian safety. Projects like bus stop amenities, pathway connections, wayfinding signs, bike corrals, and fix-it stations to open streets events all aim to get people around their neighborhood safely. Through our partnerships with the Boise School District, Valley Regional Transit, Ada County Highway District, and Boise Bicycle Project, these projects will address the needs of the community under the Neighborhood Investment Program. I'm going to pause for any questions for the Neighborhood Investment Program.
I have one question, Madam Mayor. I know we've seen some pictures that have some great signage for different neighborhoods. Is that a program that's continuing, the Boise's continuing? Because I know a few years ago, there was a grant application and the city said they had stopped that. So we had like a Bora neighborhood or identifying those neighborhoods. Are we continuing that?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Corliss, yes, the neighborhood identity signs do continue. We have a document that shows where those signs are located as far as which neighborhoods have them and which neighborhoods don't. And the effort is to make sure that all neighborhood associations have those types of signs, whether they apply under this program or not, for that recognizability.
Madam Mayor, I do have a question. Was this bucket of funds was how the Sunset Park shade structure came about? Question mark?
Madam
Sorry.
Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I believe so.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of projects that have started with Energize and then moved on to other departments or evolved. So I would have to confirm that.
Great. And just as like it's fun to see some of the specific, the micropath connections, the wayfinding signs, even the Goddard Street linear park, I think originated out of a very, very much older version of this investment program, but it's really cool to see how neighborhoods are using it to address specific challenges in their area.
Thank you. Energize Ed workshops are quarterly sessions featuring a multitude of topics and held at different locations throughout the city. These workshops were held prior to COVID and have made their return, with the first session in 2024 held in March, which focused on practical housing solutions and gave insight to impactful programs. City staff from Housing and Community Development presented on the Home Improvement Program, which provides income-qualified homeowners a means to make necessary home repairs, as well as Neighbor Works Boise, who shared their Home Share Hub program, which is aimed to foster connections and address housing needs within the community by matching homeowners with compatible housemates. The next Energize Ed session is scheduled for Tuesday, June 25th at Boise Urban Garden School, Bugs, and features our Curb It team offering education around trash and recycling compost programs. These Energize Ed workshops have been a great networking opportunity for our neighborhoods to bring people together as well as receive some education. The Boise Neighborhood Interactive returns October 2024. This community-led conference, which is free and open to all, engages residents in creating safe and welcoming neighborhoods through workshop sessions, keynote speakers, and panelists. I believe you all have this event already reserved on your calendars. I have saved the date cards here that I'll leave with Amanda for you to share out with when you're in the community. The Energize Block Party trailer is a block party on wheels. It's available for neighborhoods or community groups to reserve for free once per year for weekend events within city limits. The trailer is outfitted with everything needed for a block party. It's in high demand, and it's open May through October. So this last weekend was our first time taking out the Energize trailer this year.
Madam Mayor, this is too fun to let go. So for a neighborhood, maybe myself that doesn't know how to throw a good block party, what is in this trailer?
So, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Morales, I'm so glad you asked. There are tables and chairs, water jugs and ice chests, yard games, a Bluetooth speaker, shade tents, and safety equipment. It was outfitted over the off-season with shelving for organization and lighting for when there are parties that go on into the night. And I'd like to take a moment to recognize our community engagement coordinator, Anish Shamim, who's done all of the trailering, outfitting, revamped the calendar online for reservations, and takes it to delivery and pickup for almost all events throughout the summer. You might be asking yourself how you can support Energize. I would ask for you to encourage neighborhoods within your districts to seek out funding opportunities. While the cycles for both grant programs recently closed, it would be great to help raise awareness that funding is available again. The application for both the ACT and neighborhood investment will reopen this fall. Share out information through your networks about upcoming Energize Ed sessions and encourage folks to attend the Neighborhood Interactive in October. And if they're not involved yet, encourage residents to connect with their neighborhood associations. Projects under the Neighborhood Investment Program for fiscal year 25 will be revealed in the coming months. 9 project applications were received from 8 neighborhood associations. Those projects are in review and awards announced later this summer. By participating in neighborhood association activities and projects, residents can develop strong connections within their neighbors, build trust, and become more engaged in local governance and decision-making processes. Energize serves as a catalyst for positive change and a sense of neighborhood pride within our Boise communities. I'll stand for questions.
Madam Mayor, just a compliment and then maybe a seed to plant. I try to spend a lot of time with our neighborhood associations, and whenever I go, I always ask them if they know who you are, and they always do. And they always comment about how much they love working with you and how they love having that connection at the city, which I think is really important, to have that person, that connection that they know, that they trust, that they've worked with several times before. And whether it's an issue specific to Energize or even an issue related to something else, I think that they use you quite a bit to kind of plug them into the right spot to get to. So I really want to thank you. You're doing a wonderful job, and it gets reinforced. The job that you're doing every single time I talk with someone, they bring it up.
Thank you.
The seed that I would love to plant is the other thing that people bring up a lot to me, and I wish the 2 Steves were in here with us right now, is I always have neighborhood associations asking me how they can contribute to the city's climate action goals. And so I don't know what that looks like, if it's exploring investment funds or things that might be eligible for some of those projects. Certainly, like when we're looking at bus stops and shaded bus stops and micropaths to get people out of their cars, that's a major contributing factor. But I would love to continue to explore other ways where either it's projects they're applying for, events that they're hosting, ways that they can get involved, because it's come up at probably 4 different meetings of how can our neighborhood association get involved with the city's climate action plan. So it's the seed I'd like to plant and just say thank you one more time for the good job you're doing.
Thank you for that seed that you've planted. Those conversations are happening. And while we look towards fiscal year 26 for the neighborhood investment program already, sticking with that transportation theme, because as you said, does touch on climate focus. There are conversations happening with our climate staff to look to what does that look like on a neighborhood level and to give some project examples for them in the future.
Madam Mayor, Nicole, thank you so much. I think this is a really important program through the city, and I've been to a lot of these events, and they're a lot of fun. Getting neighborhood association participation, members in those neighborhood associations can be a little rough. And, you know, one idea we may consider is, I love this block party trailer, it's great, is maybe even a QR code on it, so that when people see it, they can scan it, they can know what it is, and get just beelined right down to our neighborhood associations. And, you know, how can we maybe do some more creative outreach that way? I don't know, maybe through our billing process, we can have a QR code. I don't know. Anyways, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, Nicole, before you go, I want to say thank you for all you're doing. Jimmy mentioned it, but I did too. I mean, everywhere I go, and I've talked to lots of people in the last year in particular, and a lot of neighborhood associations, of people sing your praises and really appreciate the support, advice, and counsel you're providing neighborhood associations. And the events are really fun, and our residents love them so much. And all that you and Anish and others in CE do to support them really makes a difference in how connected we are to each other, and then how much we love our neighborhoods and ultimately our city. Today, the deputy administrator of the EPA is in town, as are heads of DEQ equivalents in other states and and kind of the run the business side of EPA. And I went and saw them after lunch to just welcome them. And they had had a tour this morning of the pilot project out at Micron and also the farm. But I had several people at executive levels from different states remarked on how they, from what they had heard even in those presentations, they sensed a level of connection to community and a commitment to engagement that Boiseans have that they hadn't experienced before. And they were remarking on it themselves in their remarks to me about the morning that they had. And really, I mean, so much of that is a testament to the work that CE and others do to engage our residents, to create connections in community. And then as Councilmember Halliburton has brought up, like, integrate that with the priorities that we have that are their priorities as well. Because so often we hear from residents, how can we do more? How can we do more? I love that the bugs thing is on Curb It, because everybody loves to show up to figure out how they can do more and better, even though we have a 97% residential recycling rate. And that too was a question today of how is that possible? And so just really, really appreciate the work that you do. But ultimately it's the impact as well. And that's the most important piece, is the work that you're doing allows people in neighborhoods to feel more connected, to find a place, to create community, and then to engage in all that we're doing as a city. And so really appreciate it. Thank you for the good work and the update.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
And with that, we're a little ahead of schedule. We've got an executive session.
Madam Mayor, I move that we go into executive session to discuss pending or imminently likely litigation pursuant to Idaho Code 74-261F.
Second.
Clerk?
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
We'll be back at 6.